Department of Social Sciences, Health and Medicine at King's College London. She's also the British representative in the Social Sciences, Law and Humanities domain of COST, and a member of the Austrian National Bioethics Council. A political scientist, Dr. Prenzak has published widely on the societal, regulatory and ethical dimensions of biomedicine. And between 2011 and 2012, she chaired the ESF Forward Look on Personalised Medicine for the European Citizen. If you'd like to join me on stage, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not, in contrast to what the program says, I'm not, unfortunately I may say, a member of the European Medical Research Council. I'm also not a member of the Department of Social Science, Health and Medicine in the European Medical Research Council, because the European Medical Research Council doesn't have such a department. So, but King's has one, and I'm there. So thanks for correcting that. I'm going to speak today about the forward look of the European Science Foundation, ESF, that was concluded officially in January 2013. Our report is openly available on the ESF website, so you can download it from there. And I'm going to go through some of the history of the forward look, some of the core convictions that underpin it, and of course some of the core recommendations and findings. So just to give you a brief overview of what foresight instruments in the ESF context are, they are, by definition, multidisciplinary endeavors scoping endeavors and projects to develop certain recommendations and guidelines to be implemented in practice. So they have a very close practice and policy dimension, a very strong practice and policy dimension. We focus on the medium to the long term, and we try to link everyone basically who has a stake in personalized medicine in a way that's everyone, of course. Definitely scientists, patient organization representatives, other NGOs, policymakers. We had a wider consultation, including also people who were not immediately and physically involved in the forward look. And then we produced a couple of papers and reports. Before I get to that, let me just show you this slide. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it in detail, with some of the key names of the people who were involved in steering and guiding the forward look. I chaired the scientific committee alongside my colleagues Arno Ballotti and Stephen Holgate. The scientific committee had two members, Angela Brandt and Hans Lerach. On the side of the ESF, there was a management committee, and in particular, I would also like to thank Stefan Bergmans and Kirsten Steinhausen, who were our ESF scientific office leadership and support. So what did we do? In May 2011, we started to have our first meetings and our first scope. Well, the very first scoping event was actually in January 2011. And during that time, we had, as you can imagine, lots of discussions about how widely or narrowly we're going to understand personalized medicine. So one sentence that we've said and heard a lot, and if I had a penny for every time I heard this sentence, I wouldn't be very rich, but I may have been able to actually buy a car, is the sentence, if medicine has always been personalized. So in a way, of course, medicine has always been personalized, but there are some things that were game changers. One of the game changers that I think merits a forward look looking into this is the novel way of treating data and treating evidence. So the role the data play in medical practice and research is different, and we've heard more about this already in other meetings and other panels today and yesterday. Is something that merits a fresh look in a way. We try to place great emphasis in looking at both the continuities and the discontinuities that personalized medicine represents. So, speaking about the continuities, our first position paper which was under the leadership of Lars Christiansen, who was the scientific officer in the beginning of the process, looked at highlighted the necessity to not only, when we think about funding and needs for funding, not only look at the glitzy novel technologies and next generation sequencing and omics technologies, but to look at the good old cohorts and good old infrastructures and resources for biomedical research that may be pushed to the backstage in a way in our attention. So the first position paper said, well, let's not forget that some of those infrastructures need sustainable and sustained funding, and especially also because the data in those databases, in cohort-related databases, that need cleaning, that need standardization, that need to be made ready to be shared. So that's the first position paper. Then we had a workshop on focusing on technologies for personalized medicine. This workshop took place at King's College London in September 2011. Then we had a number of meetings with different groups of experts and stakeholders. A meeting in The Hague in October focusing on 3 disease areas, looking at what personalized medicine, which changes personalized approaches have already affected in those areas. Those areas are cardiovascular diseases, oncology, and rare diseases, and which changes we see as coming in those areas. Then we had a bigger picture workshop bringing those perspectives together in Dubrovnik early in 2012, and the final stakeholder conference, which more or less served the purpose of testing our recommendations and getting feedback on our recommendations, and that we had drafted by then. And the launch of the event was, as I mentioned earlier, the launch of the report was in 2013 in January. One thing that I should mention also, which is not on the slide, is that we had a number of experts also from the US and other areas and countries that were not immediately represented in the Forward Look, who were interviewed by a person affiliated with the Forward Look, and these findings also went into the report eventually. So let's start with the meat of the report. As I said, one of the sentences that we heard a lot, and we had what seemed like endless debates in the beginning about medicine always having been personalized. So we had people who felt very strongly that this is a bit of a hypey thing, and physicians have always taken seriously the individual characteristics of patients when making decisions, when diagnosing, when treating, and so on. So we try to avoid both. We try to avoid talking about an old hat, and we also try to avoid hyping something and buying into this hype uncritically. We developed a relatively broad understanding of personalized medicine, which we then found is very much in line with a report that was published after we started with this, but before our report came out. So in 2011, the National Academy of Science report in the US, it's called Toward Precision Medicine, was published, and they also endorsed a very broad and inclusive understanding of personalized medicine. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. So we understand as personalized medicine the customization of healthcare that accommodates individual differences as far as possible at all stages of medical practice, and also relevant to medical research. About the convergence between the needs, the clinical needs, and the research needs, I'll say something about that in a few moments. I'm not going through most of the background, but I will focus on some of the recommendations that we made in our report. We formulated a total of 80 recommendations, resulting in what we call the personalized medicine target. And this may sound a little bit like a tokenistic or programmatic statement. The patient is in the center. And I think initially it was a bit of a programmatic statement. So obviously, if this is personalized medicine for the European citizen, it needs to benefit European citizens, and we need to start thinking there. But the patient is in the center, or citizens are in the center, in a much more profound way than this. But let's first take a look at what personalized medicine should be delivering to European citizens. This was our point of departure, if you will. So the core promise of personalized medicine is safer, more effective treatments. There are of course, successful examples, mostly from cancer treatment. Other clinical areas have been less blessed with clinical applications and with breakthroughs in diagnosis, prevention, or treatment so far. But the promise of safer and more effective treatments that also do not increase costs greatly lies at the core of personalized medicine, of course. Personalized medicine, and this is closely aligned with Leroy Hood's concept of the P4 medicine, preventive, personalized, predictive, and participatory. So prevention is one of the core elements of personalized medicine. And as I alluded to before, there is, of course, an increasing blurring, not that this has started to blur the boundaries, but the boundaries between prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and monitoring are blurring even more recently. And we've all heard about theranostics and other terms that have been coined now in order to accommodate that. The agency of citizens and patients, most people agree, I would think, that we really need a more collaborative approach. Clinicians either embrace or are being taken aback by patients coming with computer printouts, with information they obtained from the internet or from other sources, which is now much more widely available and easily available for people to obtain, and which creates, I wouldn't say asymmetry, but it lessens the asymmetry in information, but also bears the risk of misinformation. And of course, the risk of misinformation is also there on both sides. When I said earlier, and this is not a slide from our ESF report, this is a slide from the National Academy of Sciences report from the US, the Towards Precision Medicine report. When I said that patients are at the center of this, or at the heart of this, in a more profound sense, and that's what I meant, because a story that isn't being told a lot about personalized medicine relates to this slide. So the NIS report uses something that you all know, namely Google Maps, as a metaphor for how they try to create a new disease taxonomy that does serve both clinical and research needs and overcomes that gap. So here in the Google map you have those different layers of data, raster imagery, postal codes, structures, census data, transportation, and so on. And with data for personalized medicine, there's a similar model that could underpin it. Information about individual patients, other types of patient data, microbiome, epigenome, genome, signs and symptoms, exposome, and so on. So the untold story of personalized medicine is that this needs to come from somewhere. So data for personalized medicine will no longer be data from sciences, omics data. There will increasingly be other clinical data and data from patients' personal domains. And this cannot be dismissed very easily as a fad of people who like to use smartphones and people who used to like social tools. You know this concept of mobile leapfrogging, even in parts of the world where people don't have access to stable electricity supply. They have now access to mobile phones. It's easy. Some people access the internet on mobile phones for the first time in their lives, and also for non-user groups in the privileged parts of the world who may not be able to switch on a computer, start off a program, or operate a keyboard. Touch-screen fitted devices have done away with the need for that. So the user groups are diversifying, and non-user groups will probably be more deliberate non-user groups rather than people who lack access. So putting the patient in the center means also looking into what it means that patients are expected to provide data for the realization of personalized medicine. So the new disease taxonomy that in our typology is sort of wrapped around the citizen in the center of personalized medicine resonates very much with the quest of the National Academy of Sciences report to develop a disease taxonomy that replaces symptom-based classifications and taxonomies with descriptions of individuals, of disease stages, and of stages of health by molecular and other data. So we have a data-rich characterization of individuals and stages rather than the classical symptom-based disease taxonomies, which is not something that we have reached so far, but this is also one of the core and the core convictions, in a way, of personalized medicine. So for the healthcare profession, what could or should personalized medicine deliver? Obviously, and this is something that we have started to see already, it should enable greater insight into complex and chronic diseases, create more opportunities in disease subclassification. It should render the use of existing drugs more effective and increase drug efficacy in unstratified patient groups. Also, as I mentioned earlier, with regard to this data-rich classification of individuals and stages, we are probably moving from a one-off depiction of a particular problem into a more linear life course approach of data, where you have a combination and integrated set of data of stable data and dynamic data, gene expression data, and so on, which can then be linked to other environmental and lifestyle-related data, going even to environmental toxicities and so on. So there's the potential for the creation of such long data sets that could provide health professionals with individual baseline physiological data, improved recognition of relevant pathological changes earlier on, and therefore the opportunity for greater prevention, and maybe also the outsourcing of prevention to patients themselves, which is a double-edged sword, because for patients it could come at a cost as well. So, moving on to data handling, saying that we need integrated data sets, that we need those long data sets and dynamic data sets, doesn't solve the problem of how to obtain that, of course. So, we need comprehensive, accessible, and interoperable data sets to support the development of this new disease taxonomy that I talked about, and to allow for its ongoing refinement and application. And for those of you who have been in this wonderful panel this morning in track 1 on semantic webs and other tools that could facilitate and support data sharing and integration, this is basically going exactly in that direction, and underlining the necessity to also channel resources and funding into those areas. So the defining feature, and I think if we had one main take-home message from our forward look, then it would be this: data integration is the greatest challenge at the moment. It's a technological challenge, it's a computational challenge, it's also a regulatory challenge, and it's an ethical challenge in terms of privacy and other considerations. So we need, on the one hand, useful and meaningful input, preferably at the point of data input, but if not possible, then later. Input from healthcare systems, healthcare professionals, and citizens. And I would like to underline the citizens. This has been below the radar of many of us so far, the opportunities that this offers. And those will be complex and multi-level data sets, including those you see in the left-hand column here: omics, imaging, physiology, environmental, and lifestyle data. So moving on to models and decision-making processes. Models are, of course, related to and hinging upon the availability of those integrated data sets that I mentioned. Current models and decision-making processes must be revised to reflect this new focus on the multi-level characterizations of citizens and stages of physiology and pathology at all stages. For reimbursement bodies, the open question is, will personalized medicine reduce cost? I think in general, this question we cannot answer. We would need to look at specific clusters and specific practices and specific technologies and specific institutional and national contexts in order to answer that. But we will definitely need, well, personalized medicine will require investment in new technology and infrastructure. It will require drug profiling based on stratification, and in some areas, of course, personalized medicine will increase healthcare expenditure, definitely in the short term and maybe also in the longer term. There will also be, it is likely that there will be an increased emphasis on diagnostic and preemptive testing, so the issue of false positives comes up, and of people undergoing whole body MRI scans because they want to be good patients or good citizens and prevent disease. So this could if we do not handle this carefully, explode costs, of course. So we call for constant reality checks, for realistic promises and expectations, and there's also no benefit in overselling personalized medicine and raising expectations, particularly among patients, in order to then, in 5 and 10 years' time, hear yet again that technology has not delivered. This is, in some areas, of course, really an old hat. So there are many areas already where research and care is done in an interdisciplinary manner. So this is probably one more call to, also directed at funders and directed at institutions, that in order to tackle the challenges of personalized medicine, we will need multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary expertise to tackle complex problems. And at the moment, in some countries more than others, disincentives are given to people to embark on interdisciplinary careers, because the ways that we assess research, the ways that we fund research are very much aligned with disciplinary structures. So this is something that needs to be changed, that needs to change in the background in order to build the capacity, also the human capacity to address the challenges of personalized medicine. So these are some of the main systems and dimensions that will be crucial for the implementation of personalized medicine and changes in all of these contexts. And I would probably disagree with this bit of the recommendation. Personally, I wouldn't say we need to achieve cross-disciplinary consensus on what personalized medicine is, but I think we need to always explicate what we mean when we use the term, and we need to keep the factors. We need to consider the factors that are likely to increase costs or reduce costs, and factors that lead to a socially robust implementation of personalized medicine or not. And we, of course, formulated a very resounding call to funders to provide the right tools in order to realize those promises and also those recommendations. So we need, among other things, dedicated funding and governmental support to ensure the availability of core infrastructures. This goes in a way back to our very first position paper on cohorts, but there's much more to be said than only that we need funding for cohort studies. Training of professionals and health literacy of publics are just two more keywords in this respect. As I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, some of the things, some of the measures that need to be undertaken for the realization of personalized medicine will build upon changes that have already happened. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, and other measures will really involve more fundamental paradigm shifts. And with this, I would like to end, and again, thank all our colleagues at the ESF, and especially also to Stefan Bergman. And I think we still have a few minutes for questions.
We have a few moments for questions, if anyone in the audience would like to ask any questions at all.